Hi.
Hello.
So,
Part three.
yes, part three. We wanted to talk about God and reincarnation
Or is this
to,
part four?
yeah, it's part four, really.
Four.
Yeah.
Haven't we sorted out all the mysteries of the universe by now? Gosh.
So much work.
Yes, you wanted to talk about reincarnation, but you also wanted to talk about neuroscience.
Yeah, but maybe just a little bit because I realized between our last conversation and now that I still have a big problem with OCD because of these non-dual teachings. It is like they placed some kind of loop in my head,
Mm,
and it's really such a mind fuck. And this loop repeats and repeats and since years,
mm.
And I think I always look for some kind of reassurance that these teachings are wrong so that I can can finally stop thinking about this.
Yeah.
And last time we talked about non-duality, at the end I said to you, maybe this is the point where I can stop thinking about this.
Yeah.
But I realized, no, it doesn't work like this. Unfortunately, it would be great if it worked like this. And I think um, it's great that we talk about this, and it's really helpful. But what I really have to do is to haha, stop thinking about this. Stop finding some argumentation and like talking to these kind of gurus in my head to I have problems with my English. I think you know what I mean.
I
It's
certainly
like a
do.
back and forth between.
Cece, did you have issues with looping thoughts before
Yeah.
your involvement? Okay. So it my guess would be there's two different things going on. One is whatever's causing you to have compulsive thoughts which are bothering you, which is one thing, nothing to do with non-duality at all. And then non-duality, which has highlighted in some way something which is going on about why you had that. Something maybe towards, I don't know, meaninglessness or death or I mean, could be, I mean, there's no reason why it's anything to do with any of that. Um, and, and obviously OCD is a very complicated and strange thing. So they look like different things to me, and that probably need different solutions.
um what do you mean that there are different solutions for
What I'm saying
this?
is that if you've got I mean, this is not my area of expertise, but I've been around it quite a lot actually. And what I've seen is that if it doesn't fixate on this, it will fixate on something else.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Yeah.
So, if we have a long conversation about non-duality, we have enough of them, and you finally go, that's it, I've really, I've absolutely got that it's a nonsense way of seeing the world, then it'll just attach to something else. And, or it could. So that trying to solve the thing which is that you're fixating on won't probably solve
Yeah,
the.
yeah, that's true. That's true.
And can I just say that, my heart goes out to you because, it's a horrible thing to
Yeah,
experience. It
thank
really
you. Yeah.
is. It really
Yeah, it
is.
is. And
And
I,
I,
I, I
I would hate it. I mean, I've not experienced it myself. I know people who have a lot, and I hate seeing them suffer with it. And the idea of, I rely on my clarity of thought so much. The idea of that being compromised in some way just sounds like such a hard thing to live with and to try and correct.
yeah. But I really think even if I had this before and I didn't realize it, that's really the interesting thing that all these non-duality things made me realize that I had this before.
Okay. Okay.
But I really think these kind of existential OCD is the worst
Yeah.
because you cannot do. anything to stop it.
Yeah.
It just goes on and on and on, because you cannot find any answer to any really the perfect answer to any kind of existential things. And so you just I'm not sure. I think maybe I would love to have some therapy for this, but it's really hard to find a therapist in Germany, because there are so many people need therapy that you don't, except you have a lot of money, then it's no problem. But yeah, so I don't know.
The the thing which well, one of the things that therapy does for sure when it's good, and what happens like what we do at the retreats, and you can get it through all sorts actually. Psychedelics will do it, ecstasy will do it. Sometimes that is taking you out of the loop, so you're above it, as it were, and you can witness it and see it. And I think that's probably why maybe yourself or other people who've had similar things get into non-duality, because non-duality, part of the positive side is it encourages you to come into a witnessing position where you're not in it, and that's really healthy, that's really good. It's then what it provides you as a philosophical understanding of what that is that's so disastrous. But the thing in itself, that ability to rise above it and be able to see it, is great. And just as a matter of encouragement, I also, I have people close to me who have absolutely got through it and come out the other side.
That's great to know.
They really have. They
Yeah.
really have, and they're wiser and for it, as people who suffer always are when they get to the other side.
Yeah.
And that shift, that shift in your state of your psyche, which is what so much of spirituality is really about, still is very relevant to this, I think. However it's achieved, that you're just, one state is doing this, and you need to kind of be in a more emergent state, is the way I would describe it, so that you can see that, and in the seeing of it, it will tend to calm down.
I think that's true. The problematic thing is that all these states, or like if I start to witness it, it feels like all these non-dual ideas
Yeah.
are attached to this.
Yes.
So
So let's put a, let's just take a big, what's the word, the sword of whatever it is that Alexander had to cut through the knot of the Gordian knot. It's like, let's cut that in half, because they're not linked. The state of that state of witnessing is the ability to reflect, and the state of going back enough that you can see your own thoughts like that. That's a very emergent state of reflecting. It's got nothing to do with you don't exist as a person. It's all one. Life is meaningless. None of that. It's all added on.
yeah.
It's no more to do with that than it is to do with any other doctrine, Catholicism, or any of it. It's just, it's a very healthy, natural state in which you can see things. And then it's like, well, how do you understand what that is? And the most obvious, simple way to understand it is that Cece is looking at herself. That's what's happening. But she's got the ability to look at herself in this deeper or more emergent way.
Yeah.
And because it's a more emergent, it's not always that easy, because things which are very emergent, meaning, that more evolved, they're quite hard. They're often harder to do until you can, and then you're fine.
Yeah. That's so true. But
And
that's
so it can push you, as it were, to develop that state, because unlike somebody else, you kind of have to. And that can be a real advantage to you, because it's like, well, a bit like if you have a physical illness, and it's like, well, I've got to, whatever it is, exercise or lose weight or whatever the thing is, because otherwise, well, you've got that with the mind. And then you will develop that faculty, and then you'll be able to do that. And it's a great thing to be able to do. And it's nothing to do with non-duality whatsoever.
Yeah. And that's the point I really have to get, because it's all these healthy things which helped me before I got so deep into non-duality. It feels like I can't use these things anymore, because everything is linked to these concepts. And that's one point why I'm so angry at these teachings,
Yes.
because that's what they can do to people. That it's even hard for me to try to be in the now, so to say, because it feels like if I do this, maybe I realize that I don't exist. It's
Again,
weird.
no, not it's not. It's not weird. Well, it's unpleasant, but it's that's what I mean by passivity. You've set up a way of thinking associated with those experiences. Look, it's just, think of it, the classical Pavlovian conditioning. With the dogs, with Pavlov's dogs, when they would hear a bell and they'd all salivate because they associated the bell with being food, and they'd salivate even if there was no food. And that's a very primitive form of conditioning, which is what's going on all the time. So you've learnt these ideas alongside developing these faculties, and so they're associated. So what you need to do is you just need to get rid of that association.
Yeah.
And that's where doing things like we do can help, because you can eventually, it's different perhaps, but I remember when I was in my 20s, I learnt some meditation techniques from my guru at the time, and it was a cult, and I left the guru. But I'd invested a huge amount of time on these meditation techniques, but I'd been told they were his techniques. They weren't mine, and they were, you would only work because of him. And so I had to go through this whole thing of, can I do them? Or have I got to start from scratch again? And it took me a while before I found a way through where I went, no, this is mine. I can do what I like. and then it was fine. And I could meditate again, and it was all fine. But it takes a while to disengage it because of those associations.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you can
And
do it.
thank you. It's been so many years, and sometimes I really lose hope. It feels like, oh my God, how many more years I have to live with this. So it's hard, but I've come a long way, I know. It's not like it was years ago, but I still struggle to fully trust myself, because that's also one thing they do,
Yeah.
that they take away the ability to trust yourself.
Yeah.
They teach you cannot trust your thoughts, your feelings,
Yeah.
everything which is you, because it isn't you,
Yeah.
And
You're
yeah.
absolutely right. And that's, for me, my aspiration is constantly to do the opposite of that, is to go, no, what else are you going to trust? For instance, if you listen to what I've got to say and you decide, I think I might trust him, you've decided that. Only you can decide that. You have to decide what you trust, who you trust. When you have to be able to tell what bits you like of what someone says and what bits you don't so much. And, all of that's you. There is no other. And it's not because, it's because how else could it be? You are responsible for yourself. So what you choose to think is plausible will depend on you, and how you act on the basis of it will depend on you. And that's why the biggest thing I wanted for years when I do these retreats, where it turned around, was at a certain point I was thinking, this is not really about just giving people the experience of oneness. It's about them leaving as an empowered individual. That's really what it's about. That's what I really want. Because
Yeah.
and then we need to do that to each other. And part of that's challenging each other too, but in that spirit that we're wanting to see. I just want to see CC thrive and grow into everything you can be. And you do look like you're doing pretty well to me. So,
I think that's a really great attitude you have. And sometimes I think you can also look as a English today. You can. I think it's important for people to know that what you are talking about is also just a concept. And
nothing could be anything else.
yes, for sure. But sometimes the way people speak, and I think you tend to do this too, is that it seems like you are really convinced of what you are saying, and that somehow people can tend to look at you like you are some kind of teacher who can teach them something about the true nature of reality also, you know?
I do, but I think there's two things in there. So one is that I'm not sure if it's how much of this has happened in our conversations, but I think in most of what I do, and certainly in when I write, you'll see the phrase "I suggest that"
Yeah, that's right.
constantly repeated over and over again. I suggest this. I suggest this. This seems plausible to me. But I am a teacher. I teach things. But then, people teach maths. People teach, how do they do that? Well, because they've studied maths. So they know more than most people. Well, I've studied this for 50 years. So most things that people think, I've already thought. And I've questioned it. I've turned it upside down. I've given it a good shakedown. And this is the best thing I've found. So that is a value, I hope, which is why, I live this amazing life where I have electric lights and I have a car outside. I live in a house. I'm fed. I don't do any of that. Other people do all of that. So what have I got to give to the party? Well, I've got this funny philosophy thing that I do, and that I've explored alternative states, and I've found ways to take people to those states and give them direct experiences. So that's what I can bring to the party. Do I have some authority on that? Well, I have the authority of someone who's lived a life. That's it. And gone deeply into it. It's also why I'm constantly wanting to go, oh, that's this thing I was wrong about. Now, so that means I could be wrong about this too, of course. And as things evolve and things change. But what we don't want to do is go from one extreme to the other. So if you lose, otherwise you end up with the whole postmodern thing where it's like, well, no one can say anything about anything because there is no authority, there's just power. And that's not true. Because there are things which you will know about that I don't know anything about. And in our relationship, that would be, you would have more to say to me than I would have to say to you in that. And that's what we do all the time. And that's healthy. The mistake is when it's regarded as some absolute claim to truth. And the biggest problem that comes up in spirituality is this thing which we discussed, I think, previously, when people go, I know this is the truth because of the experience I'm having, and therefore it's absolute. Come to me, I can tell you because I know.
Yeah.
Rather than, I'm having these amazing experiences, I'm interpreting them in this way, and this is the best way I've found. What do you think?
Yeah, that's a big, a really different thing.
Massive difference.
Yeah.
Yeah, massive difference. And of course, people can view, we can view each other in all sorts of crazy ways. But what's always fascinating for me is, and what I'm doing is on a tiny scale really, but but it's still interesting when people come to the retreats, for instance, and more now than ever, they feel like they know me because they've seen me endlessly on videos, and I've never met them, but they've heard my voice and they've seen my mannerisms and all this, and there I am in real life, and it's like, whoa, and you can see that, like, whoa, it's a bit like I got when I met Van Morrison when I was a kid, or whatever it was. But what's so interesting is how very, very quickly all of that can be undercut. And what I see, like in the group, like my online group, the ICU, and at the retreats, is that it's all up to the person who is holding the space, meaning the person who they've come to see. So if I just insist on being Tim and not being anything else, very quickly we're just friends.
Yeah, I understand.
Oh, it's happened to us, I think.
Yeah.
Very quickly, that's what that authenticity and I mean authenticity just in the way it actually is, because actually I am just a 65-year-old guy who's doing his best. That's actually what I am, and that's it. I don't know if you saw it, but I release these videos every now and again called "The Man Behind the Image," where I try and come out and go, hello, behind all these ideas which I'm articulating hopefully quite well and hope to do more. I'm alive, I'm going to die, and life is strange and full of suffering, and woo, so that we can connect in that way.
Yeah, that's important. That's important. And I would really love to come to your retreat, but I really don't think we will have the money. Still waiting for some kind of, I don't know, finding money outside so
Well,
I can come.
CC, contact me
Yeah.
nearer the time, and if there's any spare places, I will give you the places, and then you just have to get here and put yourself up somewhere. So I
Okay,
don't know if that will
that's
happen, but if it does happen, we'll do that.
okay, that's great to hear. Thank you. Yeah, that's great. I will, yeah, I will try. Yeah.
So having said what you've said, which I think was really interesting, actually, it was a really, talking about when I talk about being authentic, it's like that's not just happened, I think. Um, and bless you for it. And so, do you want to go into this neuroscience thing, or is that like too near the all of the stuff?
Yeah, at the moment I feel like I think it's important topic, but at the moment I feel like I have to distance myself completely from everything related to non-duality
Hmm.
for maybe a few weeks
Hmm.
to find back to myself, because every time I hear something about this, it just doesn't feel healthy for me. So
Well,
um
let's get into duality then, because duality
yes,
is much more
please.
interesting. It's
Yeah.
so much better.
For sure. Yeah, let's do this. Let's do
Yeah.
this. Um, First, I wanted to say, because I read your book Soul Story,
Hmm.
and I really liked everything until the part with God and reincarnation. That was the part where you lost me, and
Yeah.
I think this will happen this time too. But let's see, because I don't know. Until now, every idea you expressed seemed like the same I read in your book. But you also said that some ideas changed. I, that's right?
I mean, what I've done since Soul Story is to um, really flesh the. I mean, the Soul Story is a sketch of an idea, and the idea is, what if everything is one process of emergence, and that what I've been studying as spirituality is the most latest stage of that one process of emergence. It's not something separate. It's not a different world. It's not returning to something supernatural. It's all one natural process of forming, and that the latest thing to form is the areas that we talk about in spirituality. So the psyche, for instance, and that the experience of God is not of something that's at the beginning, and we can maybe drop the word God, that the experience of something greater than myself as an individual isn't the thing I've fallen from at the beginning. It's something which is emerging through psyches forming a super system, a unividual communion, and that is what you experience when you step into that enormous love and you feel like, oh, I'm part of something greater than me. It's like, yeah, it's for real. It's just not the way it's been visioned before. It's not some big man in the sky who's running the show or got a whole rule book you've got to follow. None of that. That's something else altogether. But the experience which people have and which I have, which feels like, wow, this is the most important experience I've ever had, it is. It just needs to be understood in a different way. And the same around the immortality of the soul, which is the intuition that somehow something goes on, which seems to make no damn sense if you adopt a view, a normal naturalist view of naturalism, which is, well, the psyche's just the extra bit tagged onto the brain. Then clearly when the brain finishes, so do you. But articulating a different way of understanding the naturalistic evolution of the universe, which goes, oh, this would make it possible. This would make the survival of the psyche plausible. And that's what I've been trying to flesh out rather than changing really anything. The only real big change has been that there's no theory of consciousness clearly articulated in Soul Story in the way that I can now.
Ah, okay, yeah. Yeah, understand. Yeah, I really like the idea that you say God isn't at the beginning, it's at the end, or where everything
It's just the latest. All I'm
ghosty.
saying is it plausible? And I think it is plausible that the process of evolution hasn't, the latest thing it would seem for us on this planet is the evolution of the psyche. That's the latest big thing that's arrived in the evolutionary process. Is it possible that hasn't ended with that? That the psyche, which has gone and evolved into this incredible thing in which we spend most of our time, is actually coalescing into a greater system, something greater than the individual. That's really what I'm playing with. And then with the reincarnation thing, that is about going, okay, so I've looked at a whole load of other old ideas which people have had and gone, that before we dismiss them, could they make sense in a different way? And all of the others, I think, have. So what about this, what is to us in the West a very strange belief often, because we lost it about 1,500 years ago. It feels like, oh, that's just nuts, isn't it? Well, I was a different person. What the hell? That's completely mad. And what, I leave my body and then some floaty thing comes in at your birth, or is it your birth, or is it conception? It's just nuts, isn't it? So I completely get, and also, not only is it nuts, but it's often massively abused. So I'm not sure if it's still happening, but when I was young, one of the standard techniques in spiritual cults was, well, Cece, I think we've met before in a previous life, and let me tell you about it. You probably can't remember, but I see that we were in Egypt together, and you were a priestess of
I
Isis.
once met someone like this.
Yeah,
It was really funny.
yeah. So I mean, I had that a lot. So I'm immensely skeptical and suspicious. Well, we wrote the Jesus Mysteries, and we launched it at a public event in Glastonbury, where I live, and we were told that we were saying that Jesus didn't exist and it was a myth, and we had not one but three people who all claimed to say that we were wrong, because they were a reincarnation of Mary Magdalene, and they knew for sure that Jesus existed. And there was three of them. So it was like, okay, all right. So look, there is a whole load of bullshit around this, but then there's a whole load of bullshit around everything, especially things around spirituality, because spirituality exists in the imaginal. So it's contaminated constantly by just crazy things.
Yeah.
Because that's the domain in which it exists. Then the question is, well, is it all just crazy things and just dismiss it, which is a popular view, or actually is that throwing out something really, really valuable? And I think, and then the problem is like, well, how do we remove all of the crazy things? So the big problem for religion, spirituality, whatever you want to call it, is that it's come from a mythic mindset, which was dominant up until 300-400 years ago. And it's still in that. So, which is why there's the level of reflection and questioning is so poor. So that's why it's constantly contaminated by nonsense. So my whole thing is like, okay, if we can apply the same level of intelligent, open-minded scrutiny to this that we've applied to other things, what will happen? Because people looked at the material world 400 years ago and went, okay, well, this is what really exists. What is it? And then they kept looking and looking and looking until they came back 300 years later and go, it's not actually there. It turns out to be information, and most of it's just empty space. Well, how the hell did you get from that to it's 99.9999999% nothing?
Yeah, I cannot get this.
It's just levels. If you can
Yeah.
see it, it's levels of information. It's like on that level, it's just information. On this level, it becomes this. On this level, it's biology. On this level, it's imaginal psyche. But it's all information on these different levels. And if you can start, so what I'm saying is, look, given the track record with physics, which was by paying it close attention and being really careful with how we think, we discovered some amazing things which were counterintuitive about the nature of reality. I think we can do the same with spirituality. And that means we can look at these ideas and not just dismiss them, go, well, maybe there's something in it. Maybe. Doesn't mean there
Yeah.
is, but maybe.
Yeah, the problem is that you cannot study it like in science. You have to rely on what people are saying. And
It's not the, yes, you can't study it because it's not repeatable.
yeah, that's the
Physics,
problem.
there's a that physics is great because mostly physics repeats. But this level that we're living on, it doesn't. It's a narrative level. It's embedded in story. It's complex. It doesn't. But we can still apply the same level of careful thought. It's like if you think of a court of law, you can't go, well, to find out who committed the crime, let's just repeat the crime and then we'll repeat it again and then get someone else to repeat it and then we'll find out. It's like, no, there's one crime, it happened once, and you've got to use not inductive logic but abductive logic, which means you've got to go, what's the most plausible explanation for everything we know?
Mm-hmm.
So with taking something like reincarnation, for me it would be like, okay, so what do we know? Well, there are thousands and thousands of accounts of children having these incredible memories.
Yeah.
The University of Virginia has got 2,500 of these accounts. 1,500 of them have been scrutinized with very carefully, and they're like, they hold up. And there doesn't seem to be any fraud involved and all the rest of it. Could there still be? Yes. But as far as they can tell, looking at it carefully, doesn't look like it. Now there's a lot of these, and a lot of these are in the West. It's not just in the East. Happens a lot, but you could say, well, that's cultural. But these are people born to, working class parents in Iowa, who are just like, got a kid going, I remember I was in a plane that crashed in the this, and they've got the name of the plane and who the pilot was next door to them, and there it is, and on and on and on. So okay, so there's that information. So we can either just put our head in the sand and go, oh, that's just weird, ignore it. Or somehow, what is going on with that? So my approach generally has been, well, before we go looking for some other explanation, why not take it on face value first? It's like with the psyche. We experience the psyche as a non-material domain of reality. Before we go, well, it's not really, maybe what happens if we take it on face value and go, well, maybe it is. And I think it is. And the same with this. It's like, well, is there a way that could be plausible? Or is it just out of the question? And the reason that I think it could be plausible is because this understanding that everything is the emergence of information on new levels. So if the psyche can survive because it's not a byproduct of the body, it's that there's, we discussed this before, that right now you and I are a psychobiological system. And what I've articulated, which is a lot to put into this conversation, is a whole ontology, a whole way of seeing the nature of reality, which goes, the universe is learning. That's what it's doing. It's differentiating and it's learning. And what's behind everything is the past. And the past doesn't just go somewhere. It forms systems which govern how it's going to function in the future. And that's true of me and the way I move my hands and the fact that I speak with this accent because I'm come from here, and the fact that when you speak English, you've got a German accent because you come from there, all of that, but also how the light works, how physics works, that, the laws of nature are things that are not something decreed by a god at the beginning of time, which is what people used to believe. That's why they're called laws. Mm-hmm. But they're more like habits, they're more like algorithms that have developed to govern how everything behaves. And then a new level arrives, and now you need an algorithm for how that plant's going to behave. And that's going to be similar to the other plant, but not the same. Because they're different plants, and so on. If you've got that, then you can see that these information systems are not reliant on each other necessarily. Well, for instance, you can see that the body is not the cells that make it up, because all of the cells move and change. So I'm 65, they say 10 years, I don't know what it is exactly. 10 years ago, I was a completely different physical body. Every atom was different. So my body is clearly not that. My body is whatever is organizing that to continue being one process. Same with the psyche. So the psyche is another level of that, which is organizing all of this stuff that's going on in the imaginal. So the fundamental idea is, okay, so like we talked about doing Zoom, and if one part of the system disappeared, like you couldn't hear me anymore, but you could still see me.
We had this at the beginning.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, exactly. You just go, oh, something's not working. It wouldn't be impossible. It would be like it's not. And so a similar idea, like part of the system doesn't work anymore, the biological, but the imaginal psyche part can still function, which means all of the imaginal experience continues without the physical, and that's what's happening in NDEs. So the problem you then have, if you take that, if you think, okay, that's possible, is, well, then what happens? And why it seems why the reincarnation understood in a completely different way, a very different way. I don't like the word even, because it's got a bit like God. It's got all of these. Is that what happens if the system comes back into a symbiotic relationship with a system on a lower level, so that having split off from one biological system, it can come back into relationship with another one, because they're both information systems that can do that. And my hunch that I'm playing with is that just like everything in the evolutionary process arrives as an answer to a problem, the survival of the psyche was an answer to the problem of death, just like all the other problems that it solved. It solved that, but also that might not be sustainable. That whilst the psyche can function on its own, it may not be able to function on its own forever. And that therefore the solution there was bring it to come back into association with a biological level. And that's essentially that symbiotic relationship of something like, here's one system, oh, this one's not worked, oh, I need to find another system, there we go, now you got another system, is a way of understanding what reincarnation is. And then you need to unpick all of the crazy thoughts, like, okay, but this is Tim, I'm Tim, I've got these relationships, Tim's going to die. But everything that's Tim has been will be included in the next phase of the process of the evolving system. So I will be Tim, but I'll be more than Tim. And that when a psyche comes back into a relationship with a new evolving biological system, then it's going to, first of all, it's going to come back into a much more less emergent state. And when you're in the less emergent state, now, it's like if you get ill, you can't function on the higher levels. So all of that's going to be on hold. But what you are is the past. That's your identity. You're the system evolving over time. And that identity goes back and back and back, actually all the way to the Big Bang. But you're a particular strand of it. And that identity continues. So it's
but this would mean that you take your identity with you.
No. You don't take anything with you. You are it.
Okay. Okay.
You are everything that you are a particular system, let's call it, because that's a word we can use for everything. You're a psychobiological system right now, and you are the past of that system, and then you're the past going back through, the past of your biology is going to go back into the evolution of mammals and the evolution of life, and you're linked to all of that. And if you've reincarnated, then your psyche will also go back through all the past of that it has experienced. But that's what it is. It is the past.
Yeah.
That's what its passivity is.
I understand, and that's completely plausible for me. But why does it happen that, I know there are a lot of children who remember stuff from their past lives, but then they forget.
Mm-hmm.
Why does this happen if you are this past in a new incarnation? I think you know what I mean.
So the likely thing, I think, is that there's something about the way the two systems come um, into a symbiotic relationship with each other, that they become one system from two systems, is that it happens gradually, and that therefore there's a period where it hasn't done this, and when it absolutely does this, then it's harder to recall. I mean, just think. I mean, I can't recall anything hardly anything anyway, before the age of what, 4 or 5. It's like the past goes, or it's hard to access. And although, interestingly, 70% of people who have near-death experiences come back saying they believe in reincarnation.
Yeah?
But yeah,
Oh, I didn't know this. Okay.
yeah,
Interesting.
that's the figure that I have from the researchers I've been looking at. It's high. Now, that doesn't mean they all experience their past lives, although some do. It means that they come back with that sense, that intuition. So it's that I think that's would seem to be what's happening, perhaps, and that is why it goes at a certain age, usually by the age of 5, if not the age of 7. Not always.
Mm. Mm. There are also, I heard of older people who remember past lives, and where they really figured out some evidence
Yeah,
that these people existed before.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
it's
There's
crazy.
quite a few, and past life regression. I had a dear friend. He's dead now, so he's probably reincarnated by now. I don't know, but he was one of the innovators of past life regression, and what he was doing was really interesting and needed to be dealt with carefully, and he knew that, not taken on face value. But that's like anything in this realm. It's like it is a tricky one to pick out what is reliable and what's not. Which is why when you have these cases where they can actually go, oh, I remember being in a vault there's one famous one, isn't there? I don't remember the details, but I was a part of a Jewish pogrom in a vault, I think in York in England, and they killed a whole load of people. And this vault or underground thing underneath the church didn't exist. So it was like, oh, none of that's true. And then they found it. And
Yeah.
it did exist. And those sort of things. There's plenty of those examples. That doesn't
Do,
prove anything, but it is intriguing.
yeah. Do you think it's also possible that it's not a reincarnation thing, but the people can access somehow some kind of universal knowledge
Yeah,
floating around and
yeah, yeah.
something like
I,
this?
I, I think I think that's an obvious other idea. Also, of course, unacceptable to the modern reductionist view, because that's impossible also, but another one that you could speculate about. I don't, and that may be happening as well. It might be both, it could be, it's a complex, very complex universe. The thing which I find, it doesn't make as much sense to me, because then it's really hard to know, well, why are young kids experiencing this and then not when they're young? Why is that? That seems counterintuitive.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if it's a past life, that seems more credible, perhaps. Um, and also, the kids are saying that was me, and I was this person, and I did this, and then the birthmarks, where I mean, crazy shit. Whereas people will remember being shot in the head and they've got a birthmark exactly where the person was shot. And that is also extraordinarily common. Well, it's not common amongst people, but amongst the cases that are studied, it occurs regularly. And so that's interesting. And the other thing, CC, I always want to say, because I always want to take it down and go, look at the things we just take for granted, which for previous generations would have seemed crazy. But we take it for granted that that my body is a creation of the DNA from my two parents. It's like these two separate things somehow have coalesced, and we've got a fertilized egg, and this is the product. Well, that's pretty far out. So the idea that it could be there's a biological level of two separate things coming together to form a new unity. and for very good reason, because it, you know, leads to differentiation. So is it possible, if you accept for a moment the idea that the psyche can survive the death of the body, if you go down that road, is it really that outrageous to go that these two systems could form a unity which also creates a new thing, which is a biological and psychic unity, and has the same evolutionary advantages? So that person now has, although they're not conscious of it, they don't remember it, they've got all the passivity from the past life, which means that that is going to play into all that, not all that previous experience is going to play into how their life works out. And that's one of the things which is a common theme again, which is you will refine things that you know about, that you are experienced before, and that this is one of the things that people point to for experiences like, you know, Mozart or whoever, or and even in a, you know, much more trivial way, not trivial but smaller way, someone like myself. It's like, well, you know, there's a numbers of explanations. I'm not saying this is the most, this is the one, but something happened. Why did I have that experience when I was 12, when I suddenly had this whole why my parents weren't into any of this, I wasn't into any of this. It just happened, and I knew it, and I immediately went into all of these stuff like it was second nature for me. And why did I find myself surrounded by at least two people who are still my closest friends, who also did that, and who also felt like, and just had a sense of, yeah, we know each other inside out, literally. And so there's all those anecdotal things as well, which play into, a bit like when we were discussing earlier, you have to decide for yourself. Each one of us will have those anecdotal things which will move you towards how you view reality.
Do you think every person who gets born is a reincarnation, or do you think new souls get also born? Because if it's all reincarnation, you have the problem when did it start? How did it start?
There's lots of possibilities, and this is really what I'm trying to push. Let's take these things seriously enough to consider them, and then let's look at the possibilities and try and see which ones actually explain things and which are best. And sometimes you just sit with possibilities and go, could be that, could be that, could be that, I don't know. So here's one. So clearly there's more people alive. So either not every person is a product of a symbiotic relationship. Some people, you know, what gets called in spirituality, new souls and old souls, all of that idea. That's one possibility. It's perfectly possible, or in this view, it would be possible. But there's other ones as well, which are interesting. I think that's quite possible. But there's also one I explored in Soul Story, just because I thought it was worth considering, which is maybe souls can split. Maybe you can form a symbiotic relationship here and there, and then now those are two different systems. They've just got a certain past which is linked, because that's a theme we've seen in evolution, where things have taken like a forked. Is that possible? I think it's possible. And that opens up a really interesting possibility, which might be completely nuts, but it's worth putting out there and just saying, well, it's possible. Is that, you know, one thing blows my mind is you and I are both related, not just because we both come from primordial Eve, the first human being of our type, which every human being goes back to, but we all come from Luca, the last universal common ancestor, which is a cell. That one cell has become all of life. Now, these are things these are things which, because it's science, we just go, oh, okay. But it's like, just take that on. It's like, okay, well, maybe that's right, maybe it's wrong, but it's the current scientific theory, and for good reason. So maybe one psyche managed to survive death and reincarnate. Maybe just one did. And that one that did has become all of them. That's also like, interesting. So there's three possibilities. And that's the spirit I approach this in. Just like, what could be happening here? Well, those are three things it could be. Which do I think? I don't know. I don't know. I'm happy with all of those.
Yeah, for me, this this is a little bit too much with the soul can split and so on. For me, it feels a little bit too crazy, but maybe who knows? But sometimes if I think about this first cell and how everything formed, I have this feeling of, oh, maybe there is some God involved in all of this at the beginning, because it seems so impossible that this could happen randomly,
Well, there's a few things with that, really. One is, if you put a God at the beginning to do it,
I know, many problems. I know.
Well, there's lots of problems. But in this instance, the problem is you haven't explained anything, have you? You've just gone, that's so unlikely. Something even more unlikely must be true. There must be a giant intelligence that just exists, which we can't even. It's like, okay, well, surely the cell is more likely than that. The other thing is, one of the things that strikes me is that people often say, oh, the universe is so big, and it is so big. We don't know how big it is. The size we know it is beyond comprehension, and that's only as far as we can see. So there's two possibilities with that. I don't know which is, but I can see two possibilities at least. One is that it's actually full of life. And the second is, it takes a universe this big for something as unlikely as life to happen. And that we're in that universe because we're alive. We're in that planet where the most unlikely thing happened because, it's a very big universe. So there's room for that unlikely thing to happen. That's another possibility. But the other thing, which is also part of the ontology, the theory of forming that I'm articulating, is that the universe is learning. It's a learning system, like an AI is a learning system. So it's not random. It starts as random, but increasingly it's not random. Increasingly it's forming a type of intelligence. So there's a physical type of intelligence, and then it's going to throw up how it can respond better. Not just react, but actually begin to what characterizes life, which is that ability to learn on a new level. And then that it's going to take it to the next level, which is, do it consciously. And then it's going to do it with reflection, the psyche, and all, so that it's not exactly random anymore. A bit like when you and I create something, is it random? Not really. We've got an intention. When you've created this podcast, you had an intention. It wasn't random anymore. And that you can trace that back into biology. It's not random, but it started random, but it's taken on purpose.
Sometimes I think there is this idea out there that we originally came from another planet, and therefore the Egypts knew so much. And maybe I think, yeah, why not? This is also a possibility, because really, like the Egypts and the pyramiden, it's really strange stuff. Nobody can explain how they built this. There are 1,000 theories around this, but nobody really knows. It's a little bit of a mystery, I think. Or is it solved now? I don't know.
Well, there are lots of theories, and there's many archaeologists in the mainstream who will tell you that, no, we do have a fair idea. And then there's people who are pushing different alternative agendas who will undercut that and go, no, we really don't. And, there's people like, names escape me. I know his name so well. But, who'll say, oh, there's a previous civilization, maybe under the Sahara, which we've lost, all the myths of Atlantis, all those ideas. And then there's people going, oh, no, it's come from outside, something outside. And so, so which of those, I don't know. But
I also don't know.
What I know is that human beings are pretty damn amazing, and we've done this. So I think we've been pretty amazing the whole way through. It's just we've got more and more amazing, and that things have risen up and collapsed in for various reasons, and we lose information as well as gain it. But overall, the arc, the trajectory of human history is quite extraordinary because of the psyche,
Mm,
because of that ability to reflect and imagine consciously.
yeah,
Amazing.
yeah, yeah, true.
Although, if given our discussion about reincarnation, if that has some reality to it, if something like that is happening, that would also be speeding up the process, because the new generation are not starting from scratch, not just because the culture has moved on, but because individuals are actually evolving. And the reason again that I take I have no particular thing with reincarnation. It's not something I've experienced particularly. I have some experience, but nothing like, no, I'm really convinced. I don't know. But why it makes sense to me, or I consider it, is because the hypothesis for the evolution of the psyche is that it's moving from the evolution of species, which is great. Biological natural selection is great for that, to the evolution of individuals. And natural selection is terrible for individuals because they keep dying. But this is a way of maintaining the individual and therefore continuing evolution on a more emergent level. And if that is the case, how does that evolution continue? And one of the ways of answering that question is through the traditional way, which has been believed by just about every culture through history, which is again interesting. Even people say you can find evidence for that belief maybe in Neolithic graves and things like that, although that's a bit iffy, but certainly in recorded history, it's very, very common belief. And the commonest belief starts with indigenous peoples that you get reincarnated back into their tribe, often their family.
Mm.
And then you notice that expands. And then it becomes, no, not just your family, but somewhere. And then in the modern world, you've got it like, oh, cross-cultural, and, oh, you've got a Tibetan Lama born in Chicago and all of that. And it's like, oh, and again, that can be like, well, that's crazy shit. But it could be the same thing we've seen everywhere else, the evolution of the process. A bit like heaven, the idea that what people describe experiencing after death has changed. It starts as something vague, shadows. Hades is a world of shadows, underworld. Same in the Jewish tradition. But then that evolves until it starts becoming these visions of religious visions, culturally specific, or visions of your everyday life, but in a fantasy way, like the happy hunting grounds or whatever, the Valhalla.
Mm.
And then it's going to become like today, where people have got these incredible, often non-religious, multicultural visions. Now, either that just reflects culture and it's just imagination, or those two are actually linked. And the way in which the imaginal is experienced now is different than the way the imaginal was experienced when souls were just learning how to do this.
Yeah. What I ask myself is, do you think that the souls decide to reincarnate?
No idea.
Because that, I think that's really a problem. You have these people who say you chose your life, you
Yeah,
chose what kind, blah, and then you have to explain why some people suffer so much. I
yeah,
don't think they choose this
yeah.
as a soul in the
I,
afterlife.
I, I couldn't agree with you more. That so there's a lot of theories about that. I mean, that goes back to Plato and probably beyond, where Plato has people throwing lots, and you get, oh, you've got Cece, oh, you've got Tim Freke, hard luck. It's like all of that stuff. It doesn't ring true for me. I think what strikes me is, when I fall asleep and I dream, I don't choose what I dream. It just happens. And that I think the whole process may be more like that, something which is naturalistic.
Mm.
However, you can learn to choose how you dream. And it's also possible that you can learn to choose how you incarnate. It's also possible that you can arrive at the place where you don't even have to incarnate. It's possible you can integrate yourself into the individual communion, the super system, in such a way that you can continue to evolve within it. Who knows? I don't know. These are all possibilities. So it could be that there's lots of different things happening. Some people are choosing to come back because they want, out of compassion, because we're all one thing, we haven't left it behind. That tradition, the Bodhisattva tradition, that may be for real. Why not? And other people just can survive in the imaginal for so long and then go unconscious, and the next thing they know, they're in another life. So all of that could be happening on different levels of emergence, or maybe not. Maybe it's just one thing. I don't know. The important thing, I think, is to be able to look at these things and see which is the most plausible, given the evidence, but also given all the other things that we're understanding. So for me, I think the place I would probably go to, if I had to put my money on it, would be all of those things are happening.
Yeah.
But not someone's, I'm going to choose to be a kid who gets some horrible disease at the age of 3. Not that.
Yeah, that's just crazy.
And not karma. Not that either. Not you're being punished for something you did in a past life, all of that. No.
Yeah.
I don't think, I think that's an old attempt to understand why they're suffering. And it's wrong.
Yeah. And maybe to push people to only do good stuff, like in the Bible, the 10, the 10, Or today, I don't want to talk English today.
You're doing so well, Cece, and I'm so grateful to you.
I'm grateful that you understand what I want to say, even if I'm like,
Oh no, I understand. I always understand what you're saying. You're always very clear.
Yeah. It's sometimes it's so horrible because I understand you so well, and I have so much to say, but I can only say such small things because it's really hard to express. But you understand.
I think you're talking about the 10 suggestions. Oh no, it's not suggestions, is it? The 10 commandments. That's right. I remember.
Yes. Yeah, I think I really like it that you take all these possibilities and say maybe the only thing that makes sense is if they are all true, and this is plausible for me, because otherwise it wouldn't make any sense. So if I try to believe your theory, this is the only way it makes sense for me. So
yeah. And as I've said numbers of times, for me, it's about staying open to these possibilities and seeing the explanatory value. It's and coming up with what's the best way of, this is what's called abductive reasoning. What's the best way of explaining this that we can? And the model really would be a justice. When you're trying to decide in a court of justice, how do you know whether this person did or didn't, or what happened? You've just got the evidence, and then you've got to just work out what is the most plausible thing. And for those, when you don't know, you have to say, I don't know. And that's how the knowledge can progress. And if we can approach these areas with the same level of intellectual rigor, I think we'll find things. I think we will. And so the fact that we have so many instances of past life recall, okay, well, maybe that's right then. How could it be right? Well, here's one way it could be right.
Yeah, because as I said in our afterlife video, I did not research it in a really deep way, but I listened to a lot of NDE accounts and also a little bit reincarnation stuff. And for me, it feels like you cannot dismiss this all. You can do this, but for me, it somehow feels possible. I'm not sure, but I think your explanation is really if I had to choose one explanation for all of this, I think your ideas are great. With the soul splitting in two, I don't know, but
I'm not suggesting that's true. I'm not
yeah, yeah,
suggesting.
I
I'm
know, I
just
know.
going that's another possibility that you.
Yeah,
I mean, just in a way, when when we get born from our parents, the DNA has split off and joined with another DNA and created something new. So more on that model. I'm not saying that that's happened. I'm just going, we shouldn't, there's a pattern in the universe where one thing has achieved something and then everything's come from it. So is it possible that it could be one soul that's achieved it and everything's come from that? Possible. Shouldn't dismiss it. And then when we don't know, we can, what I do is I just go, well, there's three possibilities here that I think are worthy of, of considering as possible. And I'm not going to give it doesn't matter to me enough to spend the rest of my life trying to work out which one of those three is possible.
yeah,
It does, that's not my thing. I'm reincarnation. If I was Mr. Reincarnation, that was my thing, then I would. But it's not. What I'm interested in is how can we get an overall understanding of what this is and what we should do about it. That's my thing. That's what I want to do. And that's why it's lovely if I can provide you with ideas where you go, oh, that's kind of making sense. Then hurrah, I've done my job. That's the thing I do, like a plumber mends plumbing. A philosopher does this.
yeah,
And if I do it well, people can go, yeah, that really helped. Thank you. And then they take
yeah,
it and it's their own.
yeah.
And I mean that, that it's a bit like, with me and my guru, I'm not going, well, this is my philosophy. So, it's like, if you take it, you need to make sure you mention it's mine. No, it's not. This is what I've got. And what I've got is to give it to other people. So it now becomes theirs. And then they can develop it and move it and change it. And
Yeah,
it's a living thing.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I really like this, how you approach this, and I think, I don't know, maybe as some parts of your philosophy, I think I will, or I can imagine to take them on and to maybe make something new out of this. Um,
The new thing that you'll make out of it the most, if you do, is CC.
how do you mean this?
Because the way in which we ideate reality is absolutely central to what we are, who we are. That's how we discern what's happening. That governs the narrative we tell about what this is, what we should do with it. All of it is how we discern things. So we've got all of that discerning going on a very low level, which is what we can survive with. But all of this stuff is the next level up, and it governs whether you think your life has value, what that value is, how to treat other people, what purpose you may fulfill. All those things becomes who we are, becomes our past, and therefore, and it shapes our future. That's what we're doing with each other, and this is why these conversations are so important. It's why people, some people will listen to this for the same thing, just looking for something which they can go, oh, that's good, and becomes part of them. And then if they really get it, your actual experience starts to change, and hopefully in positive ways. You can also change in negative ways, like happened for you with non-duality.
Yeah.
And then you have to undo that and find a positive way.
Yeah. For a long time, I thought I should not find any way. I should give up philosophy completely and say to everything, say, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know. But that doesn't feel good either. It's I don't think I have to go too far in these ideas, because as I said, I am prone to this whole OCD stuff, and I don't want to go into another one, like obsessing over what God is or whatever. So I think for me, it's important to stay here on Earth, but have some kind of idea how this works.
I think that's really wise, Cece. And I would say to you and to anyone else watching this, that the most important thing for me is actually that there's an experiential route to everything I'm exploring, which gives rise to a sense of that everything's okay. That's the simplest way of putting it. That there's a thing which happens and has become so embedded in me. It's kind of like I don't want to say it's there all the time, because nothing's there all the time, but it's there to some degree, a lot, is that it's okay. And that's incredibly valuable, because there's a kind of faith in existence. And the philosophy is there because how can it be okay? Look at the shit. So is that just nonsense? Well, it doesn't seem like nonsense. It seems like the most valuable, important thing I know. So here's a philosophy which can support that and go, this is why it feels like it's okay, which includes and doesn't deny all of the suffering and the shit that is there, because it's an evolutionary process and all of the other levels of evolution are still operative, but it's moving towards something which is increasingly beautiful and good, and you can tap into that, and when you do, it is okay.
I envy you a little bit for this feeling of okayness, because I lack this because of non-duality, but
You're also young compared to me.
okay. I don't feel so young anymore, but
and
yeah.
of course you don't. It's like, I've just been with a gentleman who's going to be 80 and is probably going to die in the next year or two. And I'm sure he looks at me and thinks, God, he's so young.
Yeah.
But I feel old. And of course, we all do that. My daughter's 24 and she thinks she's old.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I remember feeling that, don't you? And you're like, oh, everything's going past now. So yeah, but I'm not being flippant. We shouldn't underestimate what happens in a lifetime and what an opportunity it is for evolution. And you've got that opportunity. And so what I'm saying is that it's okay. There's every chance, that if when you're my age, talking to someone your age, you'll be the one going, no, I've got it. I've got this underlying. It's not always okay. Sometimes I have shit days, of course. But despite that, there's some, and that for me is, when you said about God, for me, that's what arises in the unividual communion, let's call it, so we don't have to use that old word. When I touch that super system, which is the most emergent place that Tim seems to be able to go, to be part of something which is a communion, a recognition that this is all one, but not by the dissolution of Tim, but by taking Tim to another level of his individuality, that's when it comes in. That's when it goes, oh, this is so good, it's worth it all.
But just to say something to this communion God thing, is this the right word?
I make words up because there are no right words.
I'm a little bit confused, because what do you mean by it's all one in this context?
Okay, what I mean in this context is, it seems to me that this is all, the universe is made up of lots of individual things with individual qualities, forming into little systems, all interrelating, but that fundamentally the universe is a universe. Universe really means all one. That's what it means, a universe, universus. It's a totality. So the way the most plausibly abductive way that I've been able to think about that is going, well, there's one thing which is differentiated into all things, and that's the process of forming. So it's one thing. Now, what's happened, because I am conscious and because I am living at this particular time in history, I have the ability to become conscious of the fact that it's all one. And that changes how I experience myself. Because rather than just experiencing myself as this skin bag, as Alan Watts used to say, as this little separate individual, actually I've got a sense that I am that, but I'm arising within something which is one thing. So I'm not utterly separate from anything. And that changes. That's what I mean by a unividual, an individual conscious of unity. And that's the positive thing which non-duality taps into and then makes negative.
Mm.
But it's a really positive thing. And that when that happens, I come into communion with this greater thing.
But what's this greater thing?
The greater thing is souls in communion.
But
and
this
the and the
is but this has to be somehow also separate.
it's an individual system.
Yeah, yes, that's what I
Yeah,
mean. So
absolutely,
it's not
absolutely.
the same as this unity. It's
No,
somehow a
no,
system
it's a system.
inside this unity.
Absolutely right.
Okay, now I got
Absolutely
it.
right. So
Yeah.
it's another level of the forming. It's just that what marks out this level, I think, is that it's comprised of psyches in a state of communion, and that it it is something. It's the big mind, which the Hermeticists talked about, the Zen people talk about. It's not where it started. The big mind has arisen from all of these small minds combining, just like the internet has arisen from all of these computers. It's like it's a super system, and that pattern has happened again and again. I'm a super system of cells on a biological level. They've all come together, they're all different, they all work magically together as one system, and you've got a body. Same
Okay.
thing, but on the next level.
Okay, I
And
understand.
it's not the it's a very different idea. It is part of the evolving universe. It's just the most emergent part, and it's the part that when we touch it, we go, "Oh, there's something greater than me," and it feels like love because there is something greater than you, and it does. And the response you have to being in communion can be described as love.
Mm-hmm.
That's the emotional response that happens to you as an individual and to your body when you touch this deep connection with everything.
Okay, yeah, no, I understand. Yeah. Yeah, sometimes it's better if people explain it to you because you wrote this in the book. But it was a little bit too abstract. Now I get it better.
Well, hopefully, it's been a few years since the book, so hopefully I'm getting better at being able to articulate it.
Maybe.
But one of the great things, one of the hard things, well, I think so. I think I am. I hope so anyway. But one of the things about writing a book, have you written a book,
No, I
Miguel?
want to, but I'm not sure
I,
if I will ever do this.
yeah, yeah, yeah. You probably will. Although books are a bit old technology, really. You're doing this. That's the modern technology. Um, but one of the things about writing a book is you're talking to everyone. One of the great
Mm.
things about having a conversation is I'm just talking to you. So I can tell when I say something, I'm intuiting, I'm meeting you, and I'm doing my best and I can read that meeting in such a way that I'm more likely to say it in a way where you can come back to me. You see, it's like, I wish, this is why this is better. No one reads a book and says, Tim, hang on a second. Hang on. What do you mean by this? You can't do that with a book, but you can do it with this.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
So that's why this works so well.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. Maybe we maybe we should meet uh, another time and I will write down some questions I have to all the stuff I heard from you so that you can respond to all of this because I think I if I go on thinking about all you have told me a little bit, I will have some questions maybe. And
I'm
maybe that's
sure you will.
interesting.
I'm sure,
Yeah.
and so you should. So you
Yeah.
should, because I sit here every day with all of this, and I'm full of new questions all the time. So,
Mhm.
but it's been a lovely conversation. So
Yeah.
hopefully it's been of value to you. I've loved it, and hopefully it's been of value to anyone who watched this. And
Yeah, I hope this too. And I really like talking to you. You're such a, I don't know, great person to talk to. It makes so much fun.
oh well, I'm just delighted to hear that.
Yeah.
Yeah, really. You too.
Thank you. Okay, then maybe, oh, do you want to add something?
No, I think we've covered so much, and like you say, we'll see where it goes next. But it's great. It's great to be in in touch.
Yeah. Yeah. For me
And
too.
I really hope that, you know, I'm really grateful for all of the people in Germany watching this that are putting up with it being in a foreign language for them, and that I'm delighted to be able to reach across and say hi.
Okay, I hope most of the people understand English. I'm not sure. Some people don't, and I cannot do this subtitle stuff anymore. But hopefully, oh, I think you can reach a lot of people who can understand English.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, till
Yeah,
next time.
yeah. Till next time. See you.